Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a single, pretty intimidating word that trips a lot of us up: perfect. We're going to break down a really insightful sermon from Pastor Kong that asks us to rethink, well, everything we thought we knew about that word. So let's get right into it.
So right out of the gate, the sermon hits us with this powerful question. I mean, just think about it. What if the goal isn't to be flawless at all? What if we've been chasing this totally impossible standard and the real meaning of perfection is something completely different?
Now, this is the verse that kind of kicks the whole thing off, this call to go on to perfection. But the sermon argues that the real key here isn't about trying harder. It's about understanding what that one word, perfection, actually meant to the people who first heard it. And spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with being flawless. And here it is. This is the big breakthrough moment in the sermon. The original Greek word they used here is teleos. And teleos, it turns out, has absolutely nothing to do with being sinless or never making a mistake. It means to be mature, to be complete, to reach your final purpose, which in this context is all about becoming whole in your ability to love. So you can just forget this idea of, being a spiritual detective hunting down every tiny flaw. That's the column on the left. The sermon wants to completely shift our focus to the column on the right, to a fundamental change in our hearts. It's not about subtracting our errors. It's about adding and growing in love. It's a total paradigm shift. And this is the bedrock for the whole argument. The sermon builds everything on this one simple idea. If God's very nature, God's essence is love, well, then it just makes sense, right? The path to becoming more like God has to be the path of becoming more loving. And honestly, this slide distills the sermon's whole roadmap down into one single, powerful sentence. You want to know if you're growing spiritually? Don't look at how disciplined you are or how much you know. The only metric, the only thing that really counts, is your growth in love. Okay, so this all sounds great, but it can feel a little abstract, right? That's why the sermon gives us this amazing case study, John Wesley. His life story is the perfect example of this dramatic shift from seeing perfection as being flawless to seeing it as being full of love. I mean, if you looked at him from the outside, Wesley was the poster child for spirituality. He did everything right. He prayed, he served, he was incredibly disciplined. But on the inside, he felt totally empty, just spiritually dry. He was putting in all the work, but feeling none of the connection, none of the joy. Wesley himself summed it up with this incredible quote. He said his faith felt like the faith of a servant, based on duty, obligation, and maybe a little bit of fear. It wasn't the faith of a son, which is built on a secure, loving relationship. And then everything changed. His whole life just pivoted on this one single evening in May 1738. He's at a small service, not expecting much, and he has this profound personal experience of God's love. In his own words, it made his heart feel strangely warm, and it just completely rewired his entire understanding of faith. And this, right here, was the real game changer for him. He realized that true holiness wasn't something he could achieve by just gritting his teeth and trying harder. He found that as his heart was filled with this sense of being loved, the negative habits and desires that he'd been fighting for years, they just started to lose their grip on him. So how does that actually work? How does love make that happen? Well, the sermon leaves out a really clear spiritual and you could even say psychological cause and effect. So here's the model the sermon presents. It starts with a pretty simple idea. A lot of our worst behaviors come from this inner emptiness, this craving for something more. The sermon's argument is that this divine love is so deeply fulfilling that it actually fills that void. It quenches the thirst that drives us to do those things in the first place. And once you're full, the junk food just doesn't look as appealing anymore. And this quote just nails the contrast perfectly. The way forward isn't about applying more external pressure or just mustering up more willpower. It's about an internal transformation that can only happen when we learn to receive love more deeply. So, okay, if the path is love, what's the end goal? What are we aiming for? This brings us to the sermon's final and maybe its most challenging point. How do you actually know this is happening? How do you measure it? The message takes a really sharp turn here, away from all the things we usually think of as spiritual success markers. It's not about being powerful or impressive. It's not about having cool spiritual gifts or being able to quote scripture all day long. Instead, the sermon says the truest measure of your spiritual maturity Well, it isn't found when life is easy. It's found right here, in this moment, in how you respond when you get hurt. The ability to still choose love when someone has wronged you, that, according to this message, is the ultimate sign of growth. And this really just brings it all home, doesn't it? The whole point of this path to perfection isn't to make you impressive in front of other people. The goal is so much simpler and so much deeper. It's to transform you into a person who is genuinely more loving. And so, the sermon leaves us with this. It takes this ancient, sometimes scary concept and brings it right into our everyday lives with one final, really provocative question. It's not about being perfect. It's about how you love, especially when it's the hardest thing to do. Because in the end, maybe that's the only measurement that truly matters.